There's a moment in history that separates legend from truth, a moment when the power of human endurance met the full, merciless force of nature. For centuries, the image of Viking seafarers has been wrapped in myth. We picture them as fierce warriors sailing through violent storms, their ships blazing with torches, their beards stiff with frost, and their courage fueled by firelight. But the real story of how they survived the frozen fury of the North Atlantic is far more extraordinary and far more human. What kept them alive on those endless, deadly voyages wasn't fire, luck, or divine protection. It was innovation. It was engineering. It was an understanding of the sea so profound that it defied the very elements themselves. To uncover how these Norse sailors conquered the coldest and most dangerous waters on Earth without a single spark aboard their ships, we have to travel back over 1,000 years, to the winter storms of the North Atlantic around the year 1000 CE. The sea is merciless. In the depths of winter, waves taller than buildings rise and crash against the narrow hulls of Viking longships. The wind cuts through flesh like knives, and the temperature plunges far below freezing. Ice forms along the rigging and oars. Beards turn to stone, frozen solid under layers of frost. Every breath becomes a cloud of crystal in the air. For weeks at a time, Viking crews face these brutal conditions with no modern clothing, no shelter, and no reprieve. Their ships have no cabins, no enclosed decks, no walls to shield them from the killing cold. Every man on board is exposed to the elements 24 hours a day, often for weeks or even months. And yet, against every instinct of survival, they endure all of this without a single source of heat. No fireplace, no stove, no brazier, nothing that could warm their frozen hands. The question, then, is almost impossible to imagine. How did they do it? How did Viking sailors survive voyages through the world's most treacherous waters without any means of heating aboard their ships? The answer turns centuries of assumptions upside down. Archaeological excavations from 8 major Viking ship sites have revealed a shocking and consistent truth. Not a single one of them shows evidence of onboard heating. Not one. Vikings never lit fires aboard their ships. There were no braziers, no hearths, and no metal fireboxes hidden below deck because there were no decks to hide them in. This wasn't the result of ignorance or technological limitation. It was a deliberate, calculated design choice, one that valued safety and functionality over comfort. It was a decision that made possible their mastery of the seas, their conquest of distant lands, and their discovery of continents long before anyone else dared to sail that far north. To understand this, we have to face a simple maritime truth that popular culture has often ignored. Fire and wooden ships are mortal enemies. The image of a crew warming themselves by a fire as waves crash around them is pure fantasy. On a vessel made entirely of pine, oak, tarred rope, and animal hair caulking, even a single spark could spell doom. A flame on such a ship doesn't promise warmth, it promises death. And the proof of this comes not from imagination, but from archaeology. The clearest evidence comes from Roskilde Fjord in Denmark, where the famous Skaldalef ships were unearthed after nearly a millennium beneath the mud. These 5 vessels, ranging from warships to cargo carriers and fishing boats, date to around 1030 CE and were excavated in meticulous detail by the Viking Ship Museum. The discoveries were extraordinary: water barrels, tool chests, ballast stones, even remnants of preserved food and animal bones. Every element of daily Viking life was accounted for. And yet, amid all that evidence, something was conspicuously missing. There were no fire remains, no hearths, no braziers, not a single trace of any heating device anywhere on board. This pattern is not limited to Roskilde. It appears in every major Viking ship discovery ever recorded. The Oseberg ship, buried around 834 CE, contained ornate cooking vessels, but these were purely ceremonial, placed as burial goods, never meant for use at sea. The Gokstad ship from about 890 CE revealed sophisticated water storage systems and provisions for long voyages, but no equipment for heating or cooking. Even the Jelistad ship excavation conducted between 2020 and 2021, aided by advanced ground-penetrating radar and modern scanning technologies, confirmed the same mystery. No fire, no stoves, no signs of cooking or heat. The evidence across time and geography is overwhelming. The Vikings did not bring fire to sea. Historical records back up what archaeology confirms. The Grágis law texts, written in medieval Iceland, lay out strict routines for shipboard life, including 3 daily shore stops for the cooks, 1 trip for collecting water, and 2 for preparing meals. The implication is clear. Viking crews only cooked on land. The Eyrbyggja saga even tells of sailors drawing lots to determine who would go ashore to prepare food, a task often dreaded in bad weather, but necessary for survival. These accounts erase any doubt. The Vikings knew the risk. They never lit flames at sea. But why endure such misery? Why choose the freezing agony of the North Atlantic rather than risk even a controlled flame? The answer lies in the construction of their ships themselves. Viking vessels were masterpieces of maritime engineering, long, sleek, and flexible, built with overlapping planks in what is known as clinker construction. The seams were sealed with tar, animal hair, and wool, making them watertight but also dangerously flammable. The rigging was treated with pine pitch, and the sails were woven from heavy wool coated in animal fat for waterproofing. This combination turned the ship into an enormous floating candle, ready to ignite at the slightest spark. And because Viking ships had open decks, no bulkheads, and no enclosed compartments, there was no way to contain or control a fire. Maritime studies suggest that under those conditions, a fire could consume the entire vessel in less than 4 minutes. Imagine the horror, a blaze erupting in the middle of a frozen sea, surrounded by nothing but ice and death. It's no wonder the Vikings forbade onboard fires entirely. Their survival depended on it. So if fire was out of the question, how did they keep warm in such deadly cold? The secret wasn't in their ships, it was in their clothing. Archaeological textile finds from Norse settlements, such as Herjolfsson in Greenland, reveal an astonishing level of sophistication in Viking clothing technology. They developed advanced layering systems centuries ahead of their time, combining materials and weaves for specific functions. Outer garments were made from tightly woven wool that resisted wind and water. Inner layers used softer wool for insulation, and undergarments were designed to wick away moisture from the skin. Unlike many modern synthetic materials, Viking wool could retain warmth even when soaked through by icy spray. They also used furs, cloaks, and thick woolen caps to trap body heat. Every piece of clothing served a purpose, designed not for fashion, but for survival. Their garments were a form of living armor against the elements, turning the human body into its own source of warmth. In the end, the Vikings didn't conquer the cold through fire or defiance. They conquered it through understanding. They adapted, they engineered, and they endured. Their longships became the vehicles of exploration that carried them from Scandinavia to Greenland, Iceland, and even the distant shores of North America. And they did it all without a single flame aboard. This was Viking innovation at its purest, the power to bend the natural world not through destruction, but through adaptation. It was a philosophy of survival that defined an age. Over 1,000 years ago, in the dead of winter, beneath the northern lights and the roar of the sea, they proved that true strength isn't found in the heat of fire, but in the resilience of those who can live without it. Vikings practiced an astonishingly advanced form of clothing modification to survive the brutal northern cold, an innovation far ahead of its time. According to the Laxdæla saga, every morning before setting out to sea, women in the crew or camp would take bone needles and wax thread to seal the men's sleeves tightly at the wrists. They didn't tie them, button them, or secure them with straps. Instead, they literally sewed them shut. This daily ritual created an airtight seal that prevented precious body heat from escaping into the freezing wind. It may sound extreme, but to a Viking, it was survival science. Before combat or landfall, warriors would slice through the stitches with their seax knives, freeing their arms for battle or labor. What might seem like a small detail was, in reality, a remarkable example of early textile engineering, a technology that helped crews endure conditions that would have killed most people of their time. Archaeological evidence supports this practice. Excavations in Greenlandic burial sites have revealed garments with clear traces of sleeve modifications, stitching that appears intentionally sealed and later cut. These finds, along with layers of sealskin outerwear, wool, and fur-lined garments made from wolf and bear pelts, show a level of clothing sophistication rarely acknowledged in Viking studies. Researchers describe their cold weather wear as a portable microclimate, a fully integrated system of layers designed to trap heat, wick away moisture, and create thermal stability in even the most extreme maritime environments. Each layer played a role, and together they worked as a single ecosystem of protection. But no matter how efficient their clothing became, it could not retain warmth indefinitely, especially during long, frozen nights at sea. That's where one of the Vikings' most brilliant yet least known innovations came into play: communal sleeping systems. Popular culture often depicts Vikings as rugged individuals wrapped in solitary furs. But this image couldn't be further from the truth. The sagas describe a far more intimate and effective survival method. In the Eagle Saga, there are references to what were called waterproof skin bags, which historians believe correspond to the fat mentioned in the Prose Edda. These were two-person sleeping bags made of sheepskin, with the wool facing inward for insulation and the leather side turned outward to resist moisture. Designed purely for practicality, these bags allowed two people to share body heat in a closed environment. Scientific analysis and historical reconstruction suggest that this arrangement could raise internal temperatures by 15 to 20 degrees Celsius above the outside air, using nothing but human body heat. In the icy darkness of the North Atlantic, that difference meant the line between life and death. Excavations of winter camps and longships reveal that these sleeping systems were standard maritime equipment, not luxury items. The Landnámabók, one of Iceland's oldest manuscripts, even describes how crews were assigned sleeping partners based on their watch schedules. When one sailor was on deck, the other slept in the shared bag. When they switched shifts, the second man would climb into a space already warmed by his partner's body. As a result, the sleeping area never lost all its warmth, a continuous thermal cycle of survival. Ship reconstructions also show how carefully Viking engineers used spatial design for warmth. Crews typically slept between the rowing benches, resting on raised wooden platforms that kept them above the bilge, the coldest part of the ship. The sail, when lowered at night, would be stretched over the vessel to form a tent-like canopy. Beneath this cover, the collective heat of dozens of bodies created a stable microclimate, protecting everyone aboard from the freezing air outside. Even ship captains and chieftains shared these arrangements. In such conditions, survival took precedence over status. No one was exempt from the cold, and no one received special treatment. But maintaining body heat required enormous energy, and food was a critical part of that equation. On open seas, cooking was nearly impossible. Open flames posed too great a risk, and high winds made boiling water a challenge. Instead, Vikings relied on preserved foods engineered for long voyages and cold consumption. Excavations at trading posts, such as Hedeby and Ribe, have revealed dried fish that remained edible for months, ship's biscuits hardened to withstand salt spray, and nut breads dense with oils for lasting energy. Perhaps their most ingenious maritime food system was described in the Icelandic saga, the cold porridge mixture. Viking cooks would prepare massive quantities of porridge made from barley, oats, butter, and salt. Once cooled, this dense mixture hardened into a nutrient-rich paste that could be sliced, eaten as is, or softened with cold water. It didn't spoil easily, and it provided the 2,000 to 3,000 calories per person per day needed for survival in sub-zero temperatures. At major Viking sites like Jorvik, archaeologists have discovered large-scale stores of these foods, dried fish, hardtack biscuits, fermented dairy, and even evidence of honey-based preserves, all designed for extended expeditions where fire and cooking were impractical. This level of sophistication raises an important question. Where did Vikings develop such advanced survival systems? The answer lies not only at sea, but on land. Contrary to popular belief, Vikings weren't perpetually drifting across oceans. They maintained an extensive network of coastal harbors, supply stations, and seasonal camps along their trading and raiding routes. Modern archaeological surveys have documented more than 200 Viking harbor sites stretching from Norway to Iceland, Greenland, and even Newfoundland. These were not random anchor points. They were integral parts of a logistical network that allowed fleets to rest, repair, resupply, and prepare for the next leg of their journeys. One of the most revealing discoveries came from Torksey in England, where excavations conducted between 2009 and 2017 by the Universities of Sheffield and York uncovered a massive winter encampment. Spanning over 55 hectares, it featured hearth systems, workshops, storage buildings, and even family accommodations. These weren't just temporary camps. They were functioning base stations capable of sustaining large groups through the harshest winters. Here, Vikings could cook proper meals, repair weapons and sails, and restock supplies before heading out again. The artifacts found at these land-based sites show a clear technological divide between what the Vikings used on land and at sea. On shore, they had access to heavy riveted iron pots with tripod legs for stability over open fires, elaborate suspension chains for hanging cauldrons, and soapstone vessels known for their superior heat retention and resistance to cracking. These were signs of advanced culinary engineering, but none of it was suitable for the constant motion of a ship. The Vikings' genius lay in adapting their technology to each environment. Lightweight, durable systems at sea, heavy, efficient infrastructure on land. In the end, what emerges from all this evidence is a portrait of the Vikings not just as fierce warriors or fearless sailors, but as methodical engineers of survival. Every stitch, every ration, every shared sleeping bag was part of a calculated design to endure the world's most unforgiving climates. Their ships weren't just vessels. They were living ecosystems powered by human cooperation, resourcefulness, and a deep understanding of nature's extremes. The sagas didn't exaggerate their resilience. If anything, they barely captured the brilliance of how the Vikings truly mastered the art of staying alive in the coldest edges of the known world. Viking longhouses, such as those excavated at Borg in Norway's Lofoten Islands, showcase a civilization far more advanced in architectural engineering than many assume. These structures were designed with a remarkable understanding of airflow dynamics, smoke evacuation, and the strategic placement of central hearths to maximize both heat and ventilation. Yet, despite possessing the knowledge to create efficient indoor heating systems, the Vikings made a conscious decision not to adapt these innovations for their ships. This wasn't due to a lack of technological capability. It was a deliberate choice rooted in practicality and safety. At first glance, this decision seems puzzling. Why would a seafaring people who brave the icy waters of the North Atlantic choose to sail without any form of onboard heat? Especially when, by 600 CE, Mediterranean civilizations like the Romans and Byzantines had already developed reliable shipboard cooking systems. Archaeological evidence from Roman naval sites reveals the presence of bronze braziers and specialized charcoal stoves used safely aboard ships. Byzantine wrecks discovered in the Mediterranean display even more sophisticated setups, including designated galley compartments with chimney systems, airflow ducts, and proper ventilation for smoke dispersal. These southern vessels were able to accommodate such features because of their heavier construction and the relatively calm, warm seas in which they operated. The Vikings, on the other hand, faced an entirely different set of challenges. Their ships were masterpieces of lightweight engineering, flexible, narrow, and fast. The clinker-built design, characterized by overlapping wooden planks, gave their vessels the ability to bend and flex with the waves rather than resist them. This made them ideal for long voyages across rough northern waters, as well as for quick raids along European coastlines. Introducing any sort of open flame or enclosed heating structure into these wooden ships would have been a catastrophic fire risk, especially in a constantly moving, wind-exposed environment. In short, Viking ship design and fire simply did not mix. But this absence of onboard heating was not an oversight, it was a calculated trade-off. By eliminating heating systems, the Vikings reduced weight, saved space, and enhanced their vessels' speed and agility. These factors could mean the difference between escaping pursuit or perishing at sea. Archaeological studies from Cambridge and Groningen universities reveal that the same trend was found among Anglo-Saxon and Frisian ships of the era. All of them relied on cold provisions, preserved foods, and shore-based cooking, confirming that this was a shared Northern European maritime strategy rather than a cultural limitation. So how did Viking crews survive weeks or even months at sea in freezing conditions without fire? Modern experimental archaeology has given us valuable insight into their resilience. In 2007, the Sea Stallion expedition, a voyage from Roskilde, Denmark to Dublin, Ireland, replicated Viking sailing conditions using an authentic reconstruction of the Skaldalef II ship. The crew strictly followed historical methods. No onboard fire, no modern heating, and only traditional materials such as wool and linen. The results, documented by the Viking Ship Museum, were astonishing. Despite facing cold temperatures and rough North Sea weather, the crew maintained safe body temperatures through teamwork, shared sleeping arrangements, and layered wool clothing designed to retain warmth even when wet. The expedition revealed that survival at sea depended not only on physical preparation, but also on mental endurance. Archaeological findings from over 50 Viking camps, containing more than 300 gaming pieces, dice, and carved figurines, suggest that entertainment played a vital role in maintaining morale. According to research by the Museum of Cultural History in Oslo, these games were not trivial pastimes. They were psychological tools. Storytelling, gaming, and organized competitions acted as morale boosters, helping crews stay alert, cohesive, and optimistic in harsh conditions. In modern scientific terms, these practices supported psychological thermogenesis, the ability of mental stimulation and morale to affect physical endurance. Viking sailors also demonstrated careful voyage planning that minimized exposure to the worst elements. Contrary to popular myth, they rarely sailed during winter. Their voyages were meticulously timed to align with favorable weather patterns, allowing them to remain close to shorelines and resupply regularly. This was not about proving toughness, it was about smart logistics. Through calculated timing and preparation, they turned what could have been suicidal expeditions into sustainable maritime operations. Archaeological evidence from 8 major ship excavations across Scandinavia consistently confirms one remarkable fact: no Viking ship ever contained a built-in heating or cooking structure. This absence wasn't born of ignorance. It was evidence of superior maritime engineering. The Vikings intentionally designed their vessels to prioritize structural integrity, buoyancy, and crew safety over warmth or convenience. They relied instead on a system of non-heating survival strategies: advanced wool garments, waterproof cloaks, animal skins, and collective body heat during rest periods. Combined with shore-based cooking and meticulously packed cold provisions, such as dried fish, hard bread, and fermented foods, these strategies ensured long-term endurance. This paints a very different picture of Viking life at sea. They were not simply rugged warriors enduring endless hardship through brute strength. They were pragmatic engineers who optimized every aspect of their maritime existence. They achieved balance between mobility and survival, between personal discomfort and collective efficiency. Through cooperation, discipline, and shared responsibility, they created a system that allowed them to travel immense distances in open boats without relying on fire. It was through these very principles that the Vikings reshaped the medieval world. They reached North America almost 5 centuries before Columbus. They opened trade routes stretching from Greenland to Constantinople. They dominated European coastlines with unmatched mobility and tactical surprise. None of this would have been possible had they burdened their ships with fire-based heating systems that threatened safety and compromised speed. When modern people shiver in a cold wind and instinctively reach for the comfort of a heater or a coat, they're acting on an impulse the Vikings chose to suppress. They deliberately embraced discomfort in exchange for operational superiority. They understood that survival in extreme environments depended not on warmth, but on willpower, unity, and adaptation. The Vikings didn't just endure the cold, they mastered it. They transformed their society to live within it, turning hardship into strategy. Their real strength lay not in the tools they lacked, but in the ingenuity they possessed. In rejecting the warmth of fire, they kindled something greater, the fire within themselves. And in doing so, they became more than sailors or raiders. They became the architects of an enduring legacy of resilience, discipline, and strategic brilliance that still commands admiration 1,000 years later.